I'm the Scale Model Geek, and thank you so much for joining me for another build. This week I'm building Gipsy Danger from the movie Pacific Rim. Now I'm really happy with the way this print turned out. The detail's really good in this, and the parts fit really well. What I'll be doing in this build is I'll be actually putting him into a diorama in an ocean, a very turbulent ocean. And also I'll be adding some LEDs, and that's why I printed up his body and his head in clear. I've never worked with LEDs, so this could be a really interesting experience. It could go really bad very quickly. I went out and purchased these 5mm LEDs. Now I'm using a 12 volt power supply, and which means I need to use some resistors. Because these LEDs are only 2.1 volts, I actually have to use these resistors to knock down the power. With all those bits sorted out, it's time to start prepping the parts. I'm just using some resin here and a UV torch. I'm just filling up these little divots that were created by the supports from the actual printing. Now I need to use some of this liquid mask to cover up some of the areas that need to remain clear. It's actually pretty good stuff. I did make the slight mistake here where I should have probably used a bit of masking tape around the actual fins of the turbo there. It was a bit of a pain to get out, but in the end it actually worked really well. Happy with this stuff. Because there were so many flat surfaces, I needed to do a bit of sanding. Now I'm using this 800 file board, and it was a bit of a chore, and I thought I might be able to get better results if I just used the wet system. I pulled out a baking tray, filled it up with water, and off I went. Hopefully the wife won't see this, or else I think I'll be in big trouble. This turned out to be a much better system. I was getting such good results, really nice sanding in there, no dust as well. But I've got to say, with all the flat lines on this print, it was a bit of a job to get through them all. And right here I actually noticed that I had a big split in his leg. But luckily I'll be chopping off his leg, or the lower portion of his leg, because he's going to be in the ocean. I do recommend wearing gloves, because what happens after you've had your hands in water for a while, they turn to prawns. Now I did need to file some detail off his butt, just so I could get to the sanding a bit easier, but some detail I can easily replace a little bit later. He's looking really good. Really happy with the finish on that. Little trick, if the edges get all a bit gnarly, just cut them off with a pair of scissors and you're good to go again. Now it's time to replace some of the detail I had just filed off. I'm using this really thin piece of plastic card and this punch set. All I'm doing here is just punching through the plastic and creating these little discs. And that'll be my detail that I'll replace on Gypsy's butt. And I'm just adding these little discs using some super glue. Once again, a bit fiddly, but it was actually worth the extra work. Here I'm just trying to work out how I'm going to run the wires through his leg. I figured if I drill a small hole here, I could run it straight up the middle of his leg and hide it at the ball joint. And at the top of this part, I drilled a small hole first and then kind of grinded it out. So it just gave me a lot more room, a lot more space to actually run the wire through. And just a quick check where I need to drill the hole into the torso. Now I'm just chopping off the bottom half of his lower leg, and I've set up a vacuum hose there, and you can see how well it's sucking up all those dust particles. At the end of these pieces of wire I've actually tied little knots, so when I pull through the wire it doesn't actually get pulled through the whole lot accidentally. I was actually dreading this section of the build, but it turned out to be really easy to do. Now in this area, for some reason in my head, I thought I need to do all the wiring and position into place first. And I started gluing together, and in retrospect, when I look back at it, I could have easily just painted them all separately, which would have made things a lot easier for me, and then glued them into place. So, time to do these LEDs, and who knows what's going to happen here. Look at that, it actually worked first go. Now that was even a surprise for me. And with the LEDs, you put the resistor onto the short leg, which is, you can see by the black wire, the negative side. Here I'm soldering the LED wires to the main body wires. And throughout the whole build of this LED section, I kept on testing it just to make sure it was all still going well. I must admit, during this whole portion of the build, I was a bit paranoid with the LED wiring. Just pushing both LEDs into the body. I've got a green one and a red one. The red being for his chest and the green for his head. Now this section was an absolute drama. Because the only access I had was through his head, trying to get the LED in the right area took me almost an hour to get it right. But I got there, and the shake test to make sure it doesn't move, and it came out great. And right about now, as I was placing the head on, it went down a toilet. Somehow I actually broke the joint in there, so I had to pull out the whole thing and resolder it and start again. Now just masking up the visor. It's actually, to be a bit more accurate, I think it's you would call it a windscreen, because it is a cockpit inside there. I was very careful to make sure I got a really sharp edge to the tape, just to make sure no paint seeps underneath the masking tape. Now talking about masking tape, I'm just using that as well to cover most of the engine bay there. And then, using the liquid mask again, finished it off. And now it's time to paint Gipsy. I'm using this IDF blue for the base colour. Starting with the head, his arms, and the rest of him. And I'm using this black for all the mechanical areas. And for some reason, every time I seem to touch Gipsy during the painting process, I seem to get black paint everywhere, made an absolute mess. In the meantime, please help me grow and smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification button. As I was saying, what a mess I was making. So, a bit of cleaning up to do once again with the IDF blue. What I've done here is I've printed up some of the markings that I need to have on Gipsy Joker. Now I've already pre-coated him with some gloss paint, and I printed this on some white based decal paper through my laser printer. And I created all those lines in Photoshop. And I'm just cutting them to size, and once I've done that, just a matter of placing it into the area I needed to. And a bit of Mr. Mark softer, so it conforms to the body shape a lot easier. More fiddly stuff, but as always worth the extra effort. Now Gipsy Danger has a couple of numbers on his shoulders. They're the number 34 on each side, and I thought, since I don't have a printer that prints white, I'd just print an outline of the actual number and then cut out the number. But boy, did this turn out to be a disaster. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get the right shape. I could not get a crisp number. In the end, I just ended up giving up, and I think I'm going to have to invest in a printer that actually does print white. So I retreated back to the lines, because they worked. I was really happy with the way these decals were working. They added just that extra bit of pizzazz to the actual figure. Now I'm just putting on some of this artwork onto his chest. Very reminiscent of the old World War II nose art that they used to do. And he needs a GT stripe across his head because that makes him 20% faster. Apart from the numbers, he's actually come up really well with the decals. And off camera, I gave him a coat of flat clear. Now to detail some of those black mechanical areas, I'm using this gunmetal from Ammo, which is a dry brushing paint, so it's really thick. And dry brushing is actually one of my favourite areas of painting. It really brings out the detail. A combination of the IDF blue and some ivory white to do some of the highlighted areas for the dry brushing of the body. And Gypsy's really starting to come to life now. The detail's starting to pop. I'm just using some of this metallic grey to add some more details to his chest. My go-to bases are usually picture frames, and this is a 6x4 inch frame. And off camera I drilled this 10mm hole to actually fit the power plug, which off camera I've already wired up. And I created these little facades with this plastic, and I just glued on some nuts and bolts to it. Ones that I printed it up on my 3D printer. And I just super glued that into place. And the wiring, I just used some hot glue. And I'm just penciling out where I need to drill the holes. With the holes drilled out, I use a ton of hot glue just to make sure he's fitted securely onto the base. And here I'm just soldering the plug wires to the actual figure wires. Quick test to make sure it all works. And it does. Sometimes I even surprise myself. And here we go, time to remove the masking tape off his cockpit windscreen. And really happy with the way this came out. Nice sharp lines. Now I probably should remove this before I actually glued him to the base, but it is what it is. And I'm using just 5-minute 2-part epoxy glue there. And like I said, 5 minutes gives me a lot of time to actually position him to the place where I need him to be. Just to make sure I've got plenty of time to get the pose right. And his shoulder thingamajiggers, and they'll just super glued into place. Now for some panel line accent colour for his lines in the body. This really brought up even more detail. Now before I actually start creating the ocean, I need to mask up the frame so I don't get paint all over it. I'm just using some of this packing foam, and I'm going to use my hot wire knife and just shape the foam into rough looking waves. And with the shaping, I'm sort of guessing how the waves are going to look. I know I need quite a large wave in front of him and some smaller ones behind him. And with the hot wire foam cutter, it just makes it really easy to get the shapes that you really need. Now I'm just using a PVA glue to stick it all down. And to create the actual texture of the waves, I've got some aluminium foil here and I'm just scrunching it up to get the rough shapes that I need. And some wire here, and I create a little U-pin to keep it into place. And again some PVA to get the aluminium foil in place. And more pins to hold it there while the glue dries. Now I'm covering the whole area with some PVA glue, and I'm using some bigger pieces of aluminium foil, and this is kind of just to soften up the texture a bit, so it gets slightly more wavier, more in scale to actual Gipsy Danger. Now with some thinned out PVA glue, I'm just giving it a complete cover just to make sure that when it dries, the paint has actually got something to stick to. Otherwise the paint will just peel off the tin foil. Now I'm using a combination of the green and the black, and I'm mixing it so I get a really dark, deep green to this. And that'll be my base ocean colour. Now I chose a green over a blue because it gives it a much more moodier feel to it. Feels colder. Now I've added a bit of white to it, and I'll be painting the top areas of those waves. Now I'm adding a bit more white to the paint, and we're going to go over some of the more raised areas and slowly building up the tones of the actual base coloured paint. You can see it's starting to take shape now. It's starting to look like waves. And I've used some more white in the paint and really hitting the top edges this time. Sort of like the crest of the waves. Now I decided I wanted to add a bit more blue to it, so I mixed up some black and blue paint and just dabbing it into the recessed areas, just to add a bit more colour interest to the overall picture. It's looking great. Look at that. It's actually looking like an ocean. Now some of this is impasto gel, which is a medium paint. It's a thick clear gloss paint, and I'm going to go over the whole ocean area with it, and that adds slightly more texture to it, but also gives it that gloss finish. Now I also need to add some of the gel across his legs, so it looks like just water's running over it. Now to use some cotton wool for the splashes, and I'm thinning it out here so it becomes fairly translucent. And using the gel, the impasto gel, to glue it in place. I'm just adding some impasto gel across the cotton as well, and some more cotton at the crest of the waves. Now I printed up this little tugboat in my 3D printer and added some bars to it to make it look like a trawler, and painted it white, and now I'm actually painting the bottom of the hull black. I'm using this panel line access colour to actually add to the crevices of it, just to add a bit of depth to it. It's hard to dry brush white when there's nothing lighter than white. You can see it's popped out the detail there. And now I'm just using some PVA glue to hold the trawler into place. And of course we need some splashes for the boat as well. And look at that, it's all done. I think it's time for the hero shots.